people in an organization want to work for someone that they respect, whose values and virtues are similar to yours. And so I think it's important as a leader in an organization to make sure that you always represent the very highest ethical standards, because that's what will inspire people to follow you at the critical times.
Thanks, Tom. Our next question comes to us from Universidad de Sonora in Hermosillo, Sonora, Mexico.
Sí, muchas gracias. Muy buenos días.
A greeting from the University of Sonora, our most heartfelt thanks and congratulations to our speaker for this wonderful presentation that really makes us reflect and think about leadership. Our question is a reflection rather on the first question that came in from the colleague from Santo Domingo, the Dominican Republican. Does the democratic leader has really to do with technologies? I wouldn't think so. I think there are some other resources and instruments that we can use in order to carry on these kinds of participatory leadership methods. Now, do we really need the new technologies, high-tech technologies, or can we exercise leadership with other kinds of instruments or resources? Do we only need to be leaders so long as we have technology?
Well, thank you for the question, University of Sonora. Let's not confuse leadership and technology. Leaders, great leaders, use many tools to be effective. And computers, the wireless systems, other forms of technology, such as the technology that is bringing this program to you, are tools that every good leader uses to help advance the thinking of his or her people. And the challenge that a leader has, certainly one of the great challenges, as Peter Senge, the author of The Fifth Discipline, a wonderful book that I would recommend to you, Dr. Senge suggests that the most successful organizations have to be learning organizations. And so the job of the leader is to create an environment in which the employees can learn. And of course, one of the best ways to learn in this high technology era is through the digital means that we have at our disposal. Computers, the internet, all of these systems help shape the way we think and make decisions. And so that's a tool that leaders can use to be more successful. And of course, if you look at my definition of what leaders are really all about, it's trying to help organizations surpass themselves. So how does the leader do that? One way is to create a learning environment, and part of that learning environment is the technology that you spoke of in your question.
Our next question comes to us from La Paz, Mexico, from the Universidad Autónoma de Baja California. Hello, La Paz.
This is a very much related question to the one that our friend from Sonora made. The impact of technology in organizations have really changed the essence of how the leaders behave and act. In this regard, our current leader has or depends, his or her success depends on that, the tools that they use. Now the question, has this essence changed, the essence about how the leader really acts and behaves? Has that changed at all?
Well, I think it has shaped how leaders think and how they behave. Let me give you an example. Earlier we discussed the political environment here in the United States, and you might recall 20 years ago when Ronald Reagan was the President of the United States, he made a comment in a microphone that was on. He did not realize the microphone was on. And he made a joke. And he said, "The bombing of Russia will continue." Now, he was joking, but as the President of the United States, for him to have made that joke, not knowing that his microphone was on, he created quite a stir. That's a very simple example of how technology can impact how leaders lead. So, for example, if you are communicating now mostly by written letter, that's a very slow form of response. In this era of high-tech, high-touch, if Peter sends me a question by email, he expects me to answer his email that same day. And leaders are having to make decisions much faster. They're having to think through their decisions more quickly. And so in that regard, I think it does change the approach that leaders use in terms of making decisions. Peter, there's one other thing here. I think leaders also need to steal away thought time. They need to reserve time so that they can think more clearly.
I think your point, Tom, is very well taken about technology speeding it up. Everybody wants everything yesterday. But there's another point, and that is that we frequently perceive email to be a private medium. It really isn't a private medium. It really is a public medium. And a person should probably never say anything in an email message they wouldn't say on television.
That's an excellent point. And so in La Paz, for example, if you're sending me an email, you want to craft the wording of that, especially if you're a leader, very carefully, because it has the potential to end up on your television station, your radio stations, or the headline of your local newspaper in La Paz the next morning. So be careful.
All right. Our next caller comes to us from Cancun, Mexico.
My question is, how can you inspire the staff for them to really follow the leaders in all their goals?
Well, inspiring people is probably the greatest challenge that a leader has. I think it requires three things. First of all, you have to be an effective communicator. And as an effective communicator, you need to be able to set the vision and the values throughout the organization so that people have a very clear picture of what you stand for as a leader. I think, secondly, in this day and age, it's difficult to just tell people what to do. Most employees now want to be part of the decision-making process, and that's why I said in the earlier module that participatory decision-making is much more powerful in this intellectual and knowledge-based era that we live in. Because people have good ideas, and they want those ideas to bubble up and be part of the solution. I think the other thing that leaders need to do is that you need to spend time with the key people in your organization to dialogue with them and talk to them about your ideas and their ideas and try to come to a conclusion that creates a better solution for the entire organization. So in a nutshell, I think the key to getting more people involved and getting them to follow your lead, your ideas, is communicating with them and building a relationship with them.
Well, thanks, friends, for some excellent questions, and thanks, Tom, for some great answers. Now we move to our second module of the program, in which Tom explains to us a little bit about implementing a leadership program in today's new economy.
Another important question in this new millennium that many companies and organizations must answer is this: where are tomorrow's leaders? There is an age-old debate about leaders. Are they born, or do they develop through mentors and coaches? I think the answer is both. The best-in-class companies and organizations invest considerable time in recruiting men and women with leadership potential. They also spend a great deal of time and money in training potential leaders, developing their decision-making capabilities, helping them understand how to be creative and innovative, and then testing them early on in their careers with tough assignments to see how they think, innovate, and make decisions. Very few leaders are free spirits. Even entrepreneurs understand the importance of operating within the confines of a corporate structure and hierarchy. And yet, the spirited leader has the ability to break down the walls and allow creative processes to flourish in his or her organization. At the same time, leadership must complement management. It doesn't replace it. As Harvard professor Paul Cotter wrote, and I quote, "Successful corporations don't wait for leaders to come along. They actively seek out people with leadership potential and expose them to career experiences designed to develop their potential," unquote. While managers must cope with the corporate complexities, leaders are change agents. In fact, leaders thrive on change because they know that change demands a higher level of leadership. Change also demands creative thinking and out-of-the-box solutions. In an era of e-commerce, faster technological changes, stiff international competition, market deregulations, and changing demographics, the ability of the leader to gather facts, innovate, see the big picture, and then move quickly to seize the opportunity is more vital than ever before. Thus, it is typically the leader who brings new ideas and fresh perspectives to the table. It is the leader who can spark a revolution with a simple but brilliant idea. It is the leader who stimulates possibility thinking long after others have exhausted their creative efforts. And it is the leader who continues to ask what-if questions when things don't need fixing. I think it's also important to mention here the role of the mentors, coaches, and consultants. Nearly every leader I've interviewed told me that he or she relies extensively on consultants to challenge their ideas and help the leaders design and implement a strategy for success. I think consultants, used in the proper context, are part of the reason so many leaders and CEOs have enjoyed so much success over the past 5 years. But consider the tremendous impact two principled leaders have had in our lifetime. And I'm speaking of Mahatma Gandhi and Jesus. How ironic that these two icons of our society never held any official position in government, had no wealth, commanded no armies, but nevertheless, both Gandhi and Jesus could mobilize millions of people because of their principles and their standards. The power of an idea, thinking outside the box, if you will, can rival the power of a great army. If you study the leaders who have championed the dramatic surge in the dot-com industry and the explosive growth of Silicon Valley near San Jose, California, and I'm referring to people like Bill Hewlett and David Packard of Hewlett-Packard, people like Andy Grove of Intel, or Stephen Jobs of Apple Computers, Bill Gates of Microsoft, and Scott McNealy of Sun Microsystems. You'll discover that these people succeeded primarily because they thought outside the box. And they brought a unique set of principles and values to their workplace. In my interviews with leaders over the past 3 years, I've asked them what they considered to be the most important values for successful leaders as it relates to innovative thinking and being creative. Let me give you my list of the top 5 values these leaders mention. They are, number 1, courage. Number 2, innovation. Number 3, the willingness to take risk. Number 4, the ability to embrace change. And number 5, the determination to succeed. Let's explore each one of these values. Courage is the willingness to act in the face of adversity, knowing that the odds are not in your favor. Courage is the hallmark of great leadership. While leaders can display a variety of styles and personality traits, all of the great leaders in business and politics must first demonstrate their courage in order to prevail against the opposition. Just as young Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, the 1939 classic movie, Dorothy summoned up the courage to confront the wicked witch and in the process seize her broom by melting her with a bucket of water. So leaders understand that sometimes the act of courage is more important than just the result. At the same time, as Professor Peter Kostenbaum of San Jose State University in California suggests in his epic book, Leadership, The Inner Side of Greatness, for a person to be courageous, and I quote, is to be prepared for the isolation of leadership, unquote. The role of the leader is indeed sometimes lonely, but I've found that this type of loneliness is a self-imposed state. It is not required that the leader isolate himself from the world. However, the leader understands that he must isolate himself from family and friends and world events in order to think and create new ideas. In order for a leader to be courageous, the leader must also be autonomous. Referring again to Dr. Peter Kostenbaum, he defines autonomy as, quote, the ability to live in isolation and be comfortable with the feeling of aloneness, unquote. Dr. Kostenbaum also notes that for the person who cherishes intimacy and close relationships with people, isolation is as painful as it is fundamental to integrity, since intimacy without the courage to stand up for one's rights is empty servitude. Therefore, intimacy is a virtue when it is given freely by an autonomous soul. Like Dr. Kostenbaum and other management experts, I believe that courage requires a person to think for himself. To have courage also requires a leader to reason independently when challenged with conflicting opinions from those who would rather defend the status quo. And finally, for the leader to act with courage sometimes requires him to accept being ostracized for his views and decisions. This is why many people believe that leadership is very lonely at the top. Innovation in companies, that is, the process by which ideas, solutions, and information seep into your organization to create new products, new processes, and new organizational ideas, is often met with bureaucratic resistance. My experience tells me that the strongest point of resistance will come from two groups in any organization. The first group are those employees who think they have the most to lose by giving up the status quo. Typically, this is the middle management rank, or as one popular consultant and author refers to them, the encrusted layer. For it is the middle managers who think they have the most to lose when in fact just the opposite is probably true. How ironic it is that middle management, the encrusted layer, which could expand their reach and control in an organization by embracing innovation and change, stand in the path of progress and attempt to block it. In fact, my experience has been that these resistors will spend more time, money, and energy trying to undermine a new idea than they would if they simply embraced change and tried it out for a while. The second group of people least inclined to want innovation are those who do not want to be held accountable. In an Arthur D. Little 1998 global survey on innovation, they found that although 84% of companies placed a high strategic priority on innovation, fewer than 25% felt they were effective innovators. Why? Because most managers don't like the negative exposure if things go wrong. Most organizations and managers will claim that they welcome innovation and creativity in the workplace, but when someone proposes innovative ideas or products, it is typically met with sluggishness and inertia and organizational rigidity. The cause is not so much individual managerial malevolence as it is an organization's inability to inspire change and foster new ideas in the workplace. And it is not unusual for an organization to atrophy when it cannot maintain an innovative environment. This is why the leader is so valuable to the organization. It is the leader who can rally the troops and ignite their passion to support innovation. I mentioned earlier many of the great leaders who developed Silicon Valley and championed the technological and software revolution that we enjoy today. And I'm talking about leaders like Bill Gates, Stephen Jobs, and Andy Grove. These leaders fought many long battles inside their own organizations in order to advance new ideas and keep the spirit of innovation alive. So don't think that innovation will happen automatically just because you are a charismatic leader. Be prepared to challenge the resistors and argue all the way to the bank. The third value that leaders most cited when asked what inspired their creativity and success was this: the willingness to take risk. Of course, someone who lacks courage will rarely take risk. And so it is very important for a leader to be courageous if he is ever going to take risk. Risk-taking is somewhat like bungee jumping. You want to make sure the rope is tied good and tight around your ankle before you leap off the bridge or the cliff. You don't get a second chance once you've left the platform. Bill Gates of Microsoft says he took a big risk when he signed his first contract with IBM in the early 1980s before he even had developed the software he had promised to deliver them. But according to Bill Gates, it was a calculated risk because he had faith in his young team at Microsoft that they could deliver on their promise to IBM. After all, the future of their company hung on it. Many leaders will get their managers to take risks by challenging them. Now, this effort to appeal to one's ego or sense of pride can be a very powerful tool to get people moving in the right direction. When you dangle the carrot in front of someone and tell them that this is a growth opportunity, they don't feel alone. Very few people want to be left out in the cold when it comes to taking a risk. And so this is why the leader always encourages his people and becomes the cheerleader when spirits are down. And ultimately, the leader leads by defining the challenge and then doing what he asks of others. A risk taker will always walk his talk. For most people, our fourth value, change, is a source for high anxiety. In organizations that are managed rather than led, change creates confusion and instability. It rocks the foundation of traditionalism. But for the leader, change is a breath of fresh air. It is the opportunity to experiment and dabble with organizational structure and inefficiencies. Change is the leader's excuse to disrupt the status quo. And leaders seize every opportunity to rattle the organizational cage in order to move the company forward. The rationale behind a leader's thinking when it comes to change is very simple. Leaders understand that change is at the core of a company's growth and viability. Change also provides a stage for leaders to experiment and innovate. I think leaders thrive on change because it gives them permission to meddle and tinker inside the organization with their creative ideas. In my discussions and interviews with leaders, I found that most CEOs and leaders believe that they have an important role as the leader to foster an environment that produces constant reinvention. And furthermore, these leaders believe it is their role to champion change, even if it produces anxiety, confusion, causes some strategic mistakes, and temporarily hurts the organization's financial performance. Ray Kroc, the late founder of McDonald's, the hamburger fast food chain, he once said, "People are like bananas. They're either green and ripening or yellow and rotting." Leaders understand that change is a vital link to the growth and development of any healthy organization. If you expect to keep your business green and ripening, you have to also accept the responsibility of directing some part in the complex overhaul of practically everything in your company. I'm talking about from the way you manufacture your goods and services